Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm sure you've probably heard of love languages, a phrase tossed around on social media fairly often, but do they really work in relationships, and are there better things out there to serve our relationships and ensure healthy communication? Joining us today is Stephen Ng, who has 30 years of experience as a marriage and family therapist, to discuss this culturally relevant idea and give his expert advice. Stephen helps people figure out how they can have healthy sexuality and intimacy. He has literally written the book on human sexual needs, We're All Like This, used in university-level human sexuality classes. His books, articles, and public presentations create conversations about human sexuality that are safe, but not too safe. Steve's insights have led to a humane take on our beautiful human sexuality and how all the rest of us can have ridiculously happy lives and sex lives too. Stephen is the creator and host of the true crime podcast Sex Crime Central. He is also a contributor to Huffington Post, The Advocate, SheKnows.com, The Rage Monthly, Psychology Today, and Gannett newspapers. A published author, TEDx Talk presenter called What's Your Magic Sex Number, and a podcast guest who talks about sexuality in a way that won't embarrass you. Stephen is reframing an important conversation in society, one about the intelligent management of human sexuality. So I'm very excited to learn from Stephen in this episode. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm glad to be back.
I'm really excited to interview you today. I know we've sort of prepared for this podcast a little bit, and I'm really keen to see where we take these questions. So to get us started, I just have a couple introductory questions for you. First of all, I wanted to know a bit about your background. What compelled you to pursue your career as a marriage and family therapist?
Well, at the risk of turning off thousands of people listening to this, I think for me, it's a very Freudian. I'm not a Freudian, but it's a very Freudian sounding answer because my father was a career criminal and my mother was an alcoholic most of my life. So as you might imagine, home was a fairly challenging experience where I was constantly presented with trying to read people and understand, okay, is this a dangerous day? Is this a drunken episode? Who's talking? My mother or the whiskey? And I think I just got in the habit of finding human behavior compelling because my family life put a gun to my head.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's a really interesting sort of introduction to how you became, how you ended up in the career you have now. And for today's topic, can you tell us a bit about the misconceptions about communication in relationships?
Well, perhaps the biggest misconception is the word communication itself always comes up whenever anyone enters my office, and I do mean anyone with a marital problem. They first begin by telling me, well, we know it's all about communication and we have a problem with communication. And my words to them are usually along the lines of something like, but you both speak perfectly unaccented English and you seem to be communicating just fine with me. Are you sure that that's the right answer? Or is that an example of therapists saying something so many times that everyone gets the wrong message? Because I don't really think we have a problem with communication.
Interesting. Okay, so all of that serves as a brilliant preface for our discussion today. But before we go more into detail in our in depth questions, we just want to get to know you a little bit better. So, this is Have You Met Stephen? First of all, this is like a rapid fire icebreaker segment. So, I'd like you to answer these questions in just a few words if you can. So, first of all, do you have a favorite book?
Well, I have many favorite books. Right now, I suppose the one that comes to my mind is by Edward O. Wilson, who
Mhm.
is something of a hero of mine, and it's his book Biophilia.
Nice. And do you have a favorite movie?
Unbelievably, well, again, I have many favorite movies, but for more years of my life than any other movie, it was coincidentally an Australian film
Oh, really?
called called Walkabout. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
Ah.
made a big impression on me.
Sure. Interesting. And do you listen to podcasts and do you have a favorite?
Well, I don't. I confess I read very few magazines. I listen to almost nothing on podcasts, and most of my time is spent either doing therapy or making podcasts and writing articles and books.
Absolutely. And do you have a role model? This could either be a personal role model or someone in your professional life, if you like.
You know the story, and I'm sure you go to church every Sunday, Sarah. But for me, I'm a little bit like the Gadarene demoniac in the Gospels, who had so many voices in his head. He told Christ their name was Legion. I have so many people to be grateful for because, I mean, starting with my mother, who convinced me at an early age that beauty was one of the primary values in life. And that if you're not living the beautiful life and if you don't see beauty every day, there's something really wrong with you. So that was very formative for me, and it continues to be. And then since then, again, I would say Edward O. Wilson is been very important. And in between my mother and Edward O. Wilson, Bill Withers. He was a pop composer and musician, and favorite song, Use Me.
Ah, interesting. I'll have to check it out. And finally, just to get to know you, is there a class or a course that you've taken that really inspired you or stuck with you for some reason?
Well, okay, so I'm not sucking up to you because you're Australian, but the last class I took was incredibly inspiring. It was philosophy and the law,
Mhm.
and my instructor was Australian.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I did take some philosophy classes at university myself. So there you go. I loved it.
Oh,
I really loved it. Although I will say my lecturers were not always Australian. They had come from overseas and they were fascinating. They were super interesting.
well, I think it's such an important thing for you to study, and because I too I have a degree in philosophy, and it's been essential in all my writing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It comes up time and time again. So, now that we have got to know you a little bit better, let's dive into our topic for today on love languages. So, how do you define love languages?
Well, I go with the common understanding that's presented pretty simply in a straightforward way in the book Love Languages, in which the author says that there are 5 basic love languages and that we all have some awareness of all 5 of them, but that we primarily communicate love through using one of them. And if we don't understand how that person is expressing their love, then we might miss the fact that they are being very loving. And instead, we might think they're just another loser.
Okay. And how did this concept become so culturally dominant?
I think because when it comes to human sexuality and when we're talking about love, romance, matrimony, partnership, we are talking about human sexuality. When we're talking about that subject, most of us revert back to some very medieval thinking that is based primarily on religion and the notion of revelation. So here was an author of love languages with no scientific background whatsoever. He does have a doctorate in theology. He has attended only theological seminaries and Bible colleges, and he knows nothing whatsoever about how one might quantify a theory. So he didn't even bother to couch this as this concept as a theory. He simply stated it as a fact. And I suppose if one is bold enough and owns one's opinion strongly enough, one can convince, in his case, millions of people to buy your books.
Interesting. And so, is there anything helpful about the love languages framework? And if not, where does it fall short?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that way, because I wouldn't have had anything positive to say otherwise. So
Yeah.
this is one of the many things I think that I say that is very offensive to some people, because those who accept the wonder and the insight from a book like Love Languages take it on as a belief as fondly as their own religious beliefs. So when I say, no, there's nothing positive I could say about the concept of love languages, I don't mean to insult, but I do think it's important that we understand that only notions that are founded on reality can have some sort of positive influence on how we make our decisions. And that idea of love languages is not based in reality at all. Instead, I do have another idea, if it's okay to share that.
Of course.
Well, the other idea would be human love gets expressed on a broad continuum of behaviors, sometimes using words, sometimes behavior. Behavior as subtle as a look in the eyes, or someone remaining even silent but supportive, or someone demonstrating loyalty even when I'm not there, but I hear about it later. Like someone who sticks up for me, for example, when someone else is bad-mouthing me. And in all of that, of course, we humans, we hear all kinds of sounds, ranging from very quiet sounds to very loud sounds. We see all kinds of colors. We eat all kinds of foods. Why would we not be able to take in love, which is an essential part of our nature as a social species, if it were around, so long as we can perceive it? And I think most of us perceive love in the broadest possible sense. We see it in all things whenever there's love present.
Interesting. So I want to dive a little bit deeper now. Many people believe that if their partner simply speaks their love language, then all will be well. So why might this belief be misguided or even harmful?
Well, again, because it's not founded on reality, and the idea that, if two people are in love and one of them dares to communicate love by doing something that isn't the official love language, it's not so much that the other person doesn't feel loved as much as the person who buys into the love languages theory is going to typically be annoyed or disregard the behavior. And how does that harm any relationship when we express love and someone disregards us or ignores us? It's very discouraging, isn't it? So we're much less likely to repeat behavior. We have this negative feedback loop where I'm much less likely to tell her that I love her if she is really into gift giving. Let's say, perhaps borderline gold digger. And so by saying I love you, you can just almost cue in the movie of that, or the filming of that scene in a movie, you could almost see her rolling her eyes, when her co-star says I love you in a meaningful, heartfelt way, because what she wants is a gift, and the gift is going to be far more important.
Yeah. So in your work, have you ever seen couples kind of go through that struggle of they feel trapped by their love language or their partner's assigned love language?
I am not exaggerating when I say that I see this weekly. It's extremely common. because this meme of love languages has permeated our culture, at least in the United States, to a ridiculous degree. But it's, I'm doing my best to completely destroy the brand. So,
Yeah. Interesting. So, if somebody feels their partner is not speaking their love language, what's a more healthy, constructive response to that?
well, to pick up the book, Love Languages, go over to the waste bin and simply toss it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be a good start. And then to say, hey, I know that you really love me. I really want you to know that I love you. And I would like us to let go of all the traffic laws on how to express love. I'd like us to just be free to be ourselves. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah. Interesting. That's definitely a good. I mean, it's making that freedom, right? Making that let's not necessarily apply these random rules that somebody else has set out for us. Like we should be the ones making the rules in a way.
Right. So the whole notion of rules is
Yeah.
rather antithetical to the idea of love, which is
Yeah.
inherently a spontaneous, wild kind of energy, free that really doesn't do well with rules. Why? Well, because it's part of our nature, and nature doesn't like rules.
Mm. Prefer freedom, I suppose, in that way.
Yes.
So, how do you respond? I mean, I think I'm going to know the answer, but how do you respond to the idea that love languages are scientific or maybe universally applicable?
Well, fortunately, there were studies done recently that were reported widely in the media. And I think anyone listening to this who doubts me could simply do their own search on their search engine to find those studies. Most recently, I've seen articles in the Washington Post outlining that there's actually no scientific basis whatsoever for thinking that love languages are a reality, and that the people who are happiest are living their relationships along the lines we were just talking about, where they receive love in many different ways. And actually, that isn't surprising to anyone, is it? That we
No.
would be able to receive love in many ways. So a kind
Yeah.
gesture, a thoughtful gift, a verbal expression of love, someone offering a supportive hand on the shoulder, any of these things, but thousands more offer some expression of love. So I think sometimes when I'm talking to my clients about love languages, it's as though I'm talking to a very young person who is much more concerned with breaking the rules or obeying the rules than they are with the question, are the rules serving us the way they're supposed to?
Mm.
Because that's what all rules are supposed to do. If they don't serve the people, how on earth can they be any good? The rules can
Yeah.
never be more important than we are.
Yeah. I remember that coming up a lot in my philosophy classes as well, actually. um, kind of on that, actually, or this sort of overemphasis perhaps on love languages become a form of emotional rigidity whereby people expect love to come in one form only?
Well, absolutely. And that rigidity is the antithesis of adaptivity.
Mm.
So if a man has been trained or a woman has been trained to uh, give love in a certain way that doesn't include language, and then one day, after years of knowing one another, they look deep into our eyes and say, in a very meaningful, heartfelt manner, I love you. I think if
Mm.
you have rules that don't allow for that communication, that rigidity is really ultimately going to create maladaptive patterns of behavior that ultimately are just so self-defeating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to hear a bit about your book, We're All Like This. How does it help people understand human love and sexual needs beyond the lens of love languages, obviously?
My book, it wasn't written with love languages in mind. And to tell you the truth, I've been dreading you're asking me a question like this because I feel so squeamish about anything self-promoting. But I will tell you how it came about. I was thinking about so many of the clients I work with, because a great deal of my work, perhaps as much as 90% of my work, is working with a forensic population of men and women who have been convicted or at least accused and are going through the adjudication process of being accused of sex crimes. So these clients show up at my office, and they are very typically boy next girl, girl next door kind of people who are not unusual or weird or mentally ill, but they have what they all have in common is a failure to manage sexuality intelligently. And I started thinking about that, and that's what led to the book. How can I manage my sexuality intelligently if I don't even know what my sexual needs are? And even saying that sentence out loud makes me cringe, because I know from experience that most listeners think, wow, he's sure into sex a lot, isn't he? As if talking about sexuality was all about sexual intercourse, when actually sexuality is a vast world of its own, of which intercourse is a very, very small part.
Interesting.
So as I said earlier, romance is a part of my sexuality, and so is holy matrimony, and so are all of my failures and successes regarding romance and holy matrimony. My belief system regarding those things, that's part of my sexuality. There's just an awful lot there that we don't know about. So a brief metaphor perhaps would be talking about Magellan. You've studied Magellan in school, I'm sure, the one who first circumnavigated the globe, and from Portugal originally. And he took off with his 5 ships and over 100 men. And the voyage lasted something like 3 years. And during that time, he neglected to bring along one very small provision, and that was anything that had vitamin C in it. Except he did bring, I mean, this is just very awful. He did bring his own supply of vitamin C in the form of quince preserves. So his men, one by one, over 100 men, dropped dead of scurvy, a long and miserable death. And, where your teeth fall out, your hair falls out, you become psychotic. It's just an awful thing. And he watched each and every one of them die one by one, right up until, and he himself died violently in a combat situation. But how could any of those sailors ever have managed their nutrition properly or intelligently without knowing about vitamin C? And no one, except a very small number of people in the Spanish Admiralty, knew about vitamin C. So they didn't even call it vitamin C back then, but they just knew what would happen if you didn't get any. So we can't manage even our diets correctly if we don't know what we need. And in the same sense, we can't manage our sexuality if we don't know what we need. And some of our needs are universal, but they are all on a continuum. So you, for example, might need more attention from a mate than a woman who's a friend of yours. She might need less, but that doesn't mean you don't both need some attention from your mate. So it's thinking like that I think really started bothering me, and then once my clients started learning that they did have sexual needs, it enabled them to begin sharing this very simple book. It's only like a one-page essay for each need, and there's something like 26 needs. And they started reading the book aloud to each other, 1 page per evening, and then just talking about it. Like sexual play and humor. And then reading the little essay on that kind of opens things up to a question like, well, I noticed that you're really uncomfortable when I make a sexual joke. Is there some safer way we could have sexual humor and play in our relationship? I mean, people need to start having those conversations.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah, that's a fantastic metaphor as well about the vitamin C. That's really interesting. And I totally agree. Like it's kind of like when you go to your doctor and there's something wrong. What should I do? And you do a blood test so that you find out because
Right.
otherwise you're never going to know. So how are you supposed to manage or know if you have a low level in something that you might need to take supplements for or medicate something? You're never going to know. So
Right. So
it's so interesting.
you're a philosopher, so you must know about Ludwig Wittgenstein,
Hmm.
and who died in London, I believe. He was from Austria originally, but he famously said, if I don't have the words to describe a thing, then I cannot understand that thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I don't have the language to talk about my 26 sexual needs, what? 26?
Mm,
I don't think, could any of us even name those sexual
mm,
needs, much less talk about them? And finding a way to talk about them that's neither religious, as informed by the church, let's say,
yeah.
or informed by perhaps a shock jock who's incredibly vulgar
Mm,
and going for the jokes, to find somewhere in that bell-shaped curve, somewhere in the middle that the rest of us can communicate and talk about who we are and what we need and learn more about our mate.
yeah. That's totally what I mean. If you don't have the words to describe something, I love that. So interesting. So, just going back to love languages for a second, can they ever be a good starting point as long as they aren't treated as at the end of the story?
Well, sure. If I said, do you subscribe to the notion of love languages? And you said, no. And I
Mm.
said, well, great. I think we have something to get along with here.
Yeah. Okay. I'm understanding. Yeah. So, in that case, what would your advice be to help couples stop fixating on love languages and cultivate their intimacy and connection in a healthier way?
Well, I think the first step is realizing that intimacy is a product of vulnerability.
Mm.
And vulnerability is always a bit hard because it means I'm taking a risk. Even sharing my favorite color. Oh, what's your favorite color? And then we
Mm.
go back and forth. And if I share anything personal about myself, it's quite possible that someone listening to me is going to inwardly, at least, if not outwardly, sneer and maybe recoil in disgust and want to move along. The gift in that, if one can embrace rejection, the gift there is that I really don't want to be with somebody who doesn't like me. So
Mm.
instead of carefully curating my disclosures so that I'm only disclosing things I have a high probability of her liking, then I think I'm going to very likely end up with someone who likes what she thinks she knows about me, but someone who really doesn't know me at all.
Mm. Interesting.
That's what I would suggest people do. Is
Yeah.
go for the vulnerability. And so instead of communication, really the problem isn't that we can't communicate. And I run a fair number of men's groups every week, and someone will share something about their sexuality, and I'll say, is that something? The whole group is laughing typically, and I'll say something, is that something you could share with your wife? Oh God, no, she'd kill me. And how interesting it is that you have more sexual intimacy as a heterosexual man with a group of men than you do with your own wife.
Mm.
Does that seem a little off to you? And it always does.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's because they haven't done the footwork that we've done in every group to get to a point where he felt comfortable disclosing what he had disclosed.
Mm.
So I think getting to the point where instead of recoiling in disgust when someone shares something we don't like, to nod our head and smile and say, oh, tell me more.
Mm.
And then to lean into that. Now, it doesn't mean, oh, and now I'm going to have to marry them because I'm communicating approval or something. But I want all of the information. I want the full fund of information about someone. I am engaging in an intentional interview for a leading role in that epic movie that is my life.
Yeah. I guess it's about sort of not shutting off your partner when they try and share something vulnerable, right? Like, tell me more, lean into it, like you were saying, so that they feel comfortable that you will sort of accept the conversation.
Right. And hopefully, Benjamin Franklin is one of my favorites. And he said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I always have people coming in begging me to fix their terrible marriage. And it would be so much easier if we just taught people how to interview one another so they could end up with someone they were really compatible with, someone they felt really comfortable with, really safe, and someone who brought out all the vulnerability and honesty that they could possibly imagine sharing. There are
Yeah.
those people out there, but instead we're also very nervous and we try to, put our best foot forward each and every
Yeah.
time.
Mm.
And I
So
understand that.
yeah. So for the final question of this part of our podcast today, is there one message that you'd like to share for everyone to hear when it comes to loving and being loved that's, beyond categories and labels?
Yes. Yes, there is. I think all humans need love. And if you meet someone who doesn't, essentially what you've done is met someone who is inhuman. They may be a human-shaped object, but if someone is not like a moth organized to the light, humans are organizing their lives to love. And if we fail to do that, if we're not really love-oriented, we're not really a suitable partner for anyone. So for me, finding that out, because there are people who are incapable of love, finding that out is so very important that I think we all need to slow down and take the time to really interview people, to really get to know them. And I don't mean in an unpleasant sort of police manner where we're doing an interrogation with someone, but in a very, I think if dating between two people who are attracted does anything, it has to be about fun. If it's not fun, then we need to move on to someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not organized in our thinking this way because we keep thinking, oh, well, I need a boyfriend, or I need a girlfriend, or I just want someone in my life.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, I need the right girlfriend, I need the right boyfriend, I need the right someone in my life, not just anyone. And the only way I think we can comfortably do that is with a backdrop of having developed a life worth living, whether any one individual is in my life or not. So that if I'm dating, let's say, some woman out there and I'm very lonely and I can be aware of my loneliness, but I do have a very full life with wonderful friends. I have a career I love. I have a number of pastimes I enjoy, and I have meaning in my life. And I have a great Airedale named Nigel. and if I have all of this, well, it's disappointing when I don't find that special someone, but it isn't calamitous. It's not a catastrophe. It's
Yeah.
really then okay for me to be a little more objective, to do something like catch and release. So she may be very interested in me, but I think, and when this has happened in my past, I've had to say, I'm just really sure I'm not the right guy for you,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
the polite way of saying you're not the right woman for me.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I would like to move on now to our break segment, which is unpopular opinion. Now, what's going to happen here is each of us are going to share an unpopular opinion about something that we've discussed so far, and maybe Stephen can give some insights or advice about, what we've said. So I'll start us off. My one is about one of the love languages, but I want your opinion. So it's interesting because I've always kind of attributed myself to the love language of gift giving, but then my unpopular opinion is today is going to be that gift giving is too superficial to be a love language. What do you think about love languages aside? What do you think about gift giving in relationships, and does it hold some meaning?
Well, context is everything, right?
Hmm.
So when a psychopath has kidnapped you and has you tied up in his dungeon, and he says, "I love you," that's
Okay.
real. That's horrible. It's absolutely creepy. And so context is everything. And
Mm,
gift giving, I think, is really not about the gift. It's about
mm,
the heart and the behind the gift, and about the context of the relationship. So some of us, I mean, I have any number of gifts that have been given to me by the woman I love,
mm.
my wife Sharon, and she started off with an extravagant, over the top gift of, I mean, I can't even, if I went to describe it, I think it would take so long. But it was just extravagant and over the top. And it was so humbling to receive this gift. And it absolutely stupefied me, because this is in the early days of airport security. And this article she gave me was a sculpture made of metal, bronze.
Hmm.
And miracle after miracle kept happening, where, the person at the x-ray machine, they would their head would be turned, as this thing that looked like it could be a bomb, it could be anything, would go
Yeah.
through. And she carried this heavy object through airport after airport, getting to see me.
Mm.
And I looked at it, and it was so deeply meaningful, because she really had listened to me, and she really knew what would be meaningful to me. And normally I would never suggest anybody give a gift like that early in a relationship. But again, context is everything. And sometimes you just know. Sometimes you just know what you're supposed to do. So I'm not against gift giving. I think I've learned to be quite the giver myself. I like giving gifts, but it's just one of the ways we show love, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have an unpopular opinion about something we've discussed so far that you would like to share in further detail?
Haven't I shared enough unpopular opinions already? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just thinking, none of my books have sold in the millions. And so I think for a man like myself to be critical of love languages and all of the people who've bought into that, it's a little bit like informing them that the man they just elected to office is really a con man. I have
Mm,
very few people who say, "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me know." No one says that. So these are,
yeah.
and I think there's a reason for that. If one wants to be a good therapist, I think therapy at the end of the day is always about being introduced to new ideas, new ways of looking at things. And education, to be truly educational, I think must be disturbing.
Mm,
So I think if you're a therapist and you're not regularly disturbing people and upending the apple cart, you're really not doing your job, and you're getting paid way too much to get along with people.
yeah.
That's ridiculous. Anybody can get along.
Yeah, totally. It's all about changing the perspective and the worldview and of the person that you're speaking to make them see the situation in a different light so that they can do something about it, maybe, if that's what's necessary.
Well, if only you could explain that to all my colleagues.
Yeah, okay.
Because
I'll give
therapists,
them a call.
therapists really, we're very much like other people, but we especially are burdened with the desire to connect and to get along.
Mm,
And to say, and it's so tempting in those early sessions, when it's the most vital time of all, to upend that apple cart of what they're doing. Because if what they were doing was working, they wouldn't be in my office in the first
mm,
place.
yeah.
So I have to be able to very courageously, it takes me courage for me to speak up and say, I don't think that's actually what's going on. And then to let them look at me. And well, here's an example. I could give you examples all day long, but I admit often I have people who come into my office and announce that they are sadly addicted to sex. Yeah, sex addict. Yes, I'm a sex addict, and I go to Sex Addicts Anonymous, and I always have to tell them, and I try to make it very gentle, but I think it's important to tell them sex addiction is not a thing. There's no scientific evidence for that.
Wow.
No one who subscribes to the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, no one has ever seen sex addiction in that book. It's simply not a thing, nor is porn addiction, nor are any of the other self-diagnosed malignant conditions that I have so many people coming. So I have lots of unpopular opinions. I have an abundance of riches when it comes to unpopular opinions.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm glad that we chose that segment to do for our break segment because it's very interesting, and I feel like our whole episode today is kind of like one big unpopular opinion, but it's a very important one. So, I think it's interesting, and I wish we had more time to go into some of those that you've just said. But unfortunately, I am going to have to move on to our practices and habits segment. Now, I just want to ask you for this one, is there a habit that you recommend couples practicing to communicate better or have their needs met without relying on the love languages that we've been talking about?
Oh, without relying on love languages, I don't know if there's any hope. Yes, absolutely. And I can do this without being self-promoting. So for many, well, I think it's still the case that the New York Times has on its masthead all the news that's fit to print. And that's their slogan that they live by. So if anyone out there listening to this, and especially parents, I would encourage you to read your newspapers and to maybe, whether it's online or the actual wooden newspaper made of paper, and to once a week, look for a story on human sexuality. It could be on the front page, it could be in the business section, it might be in the sports section of the newspaper, but to simply at the breakfast table, hopefully on a weekend day where there's lots of time and everybody's very relaxed, and of course, hopefully the children are sitting at the table, and to simply say, would you listen to this? And then read that article and lean back in your chair and say, and what do you think of that? And then just be quiet. Because the important thing isn't pounding doctrine into anyone's head that these are the right thoughts about gender or orientation or behaviors or any of the rest of it. The important thing for all of us, I think, is to have the conversation. Because we know from research that when people are social enough to talk together, they get smarter. Different parts of the brain get activated when we have conversations, like even this one between you and me. We get smarter, the two of us, by talking about a subject. And for the children, even as young as 6 years old, 8 years old, for them to hear mother or father talk about sexuality at the breakfast table on the weekend, it communicates that, oh, this is an acceptable topic of conversation. And that, oh, we can talk about this openly and comfortably, and we can think about it and listen to each other, share our thoughts, whatever they are. It might be someone like a letter to an advice columnist. I mean, those are always good for one of these kinds of issues. It might be a critical review of a rather racy movie or book. It could be really just about any part of the newspaper is going to have something like this. And if you did that once a week, that would be 52 times in a year. And if you had an 8-year-old with you in your home for another 10 years, that would be, that would be 500 conversations about sexuality. I think that's going to be a different 18-year-old than the 18-year-old who doesn't ever discuss sexuality. And in terms of a romance or a relationship with a significant other, I think the same thing is true, that it has to be important for us to discuss. And sexuality is the well that never runs dry. There is always a new wrinkle to the conversation. There's always something more to be learned. And so reading the news back and forth to each other, I think is going to help all of us get more relaxed, or the technically speaking, desensitized to the notion of conversation about sexuality.
Yeah. And do you think that there will be challenges or struggles when people try and do this? Like to read the newspaper and open the conversation about it, at the breakfast table seems like it could be put some people in a vulnerable position compared to what they're used to. Do you think that people would struggle?
I really don't. I mean, I can't imagine anything safer than reading from the public newspaper that has all the news that's fit to print. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not talking about some scandal rag, that has something about movie stars cheating on each other or something like that, but
Hmm.
just something, even the advice columnists, I don't know who's famous in your country for giving out advice, but whether the advice is good or it's horrible, it just really doesn't matter, because each person at the table gets to have an opinion. And I think the principle there is to do a lot of listening and even asking questions like, are you sure? Does that really make sense? Would you like to be treated that way? All of those kinds of questions. So I don't think it's too I don't think it's asking too much, because we're talking about someone else, not you and me.
Yeah. True. That makes it easier, doesn't it? To sort of separate
Always,
yourself. Mm-hmm.
always.
Okay. This has been some amazing advice, and I've really enjoyed interviewing you so far. We're coming toward the end of our podcast, and unfortunately, I am going to ask you to be self promoting in a moment. But before we do that, this is going to be our open mic segment. And I mean, you're welcome to be self promoting now, but this is kind of your chance to talk about anything you're passionate about, talk about things that you've done, talk about something that you think is important that we've missed so far in the conversation. The floor is completely yours.
Well, I'm very passionate about a lot of things. Although, if you knew me, to observe me, you might think, well, he's a very boring man. I mean, he gardens, he watches birds, he's at home all the time. But I'm very passionate about trying to share this message about managing sexuality intelligently. And I think that passion informs me and encourages me to never quit. So recently, the Guinness Book of World Records had a story on an individual who's the oldest practicing physician in the world,
Wow.
and he's 102. So, and so he doesn't have patients, but he teaches full time. He goes to work every day, and he hasn't had a charmed life. When he was in his 80s, he was out skiing and he broke his neck, and he's come back from that with no problem. So this guy, he talks about the importance of having a mission or a sense of purpose in life. And when I read that, it just so resonated with me, because that's how I feel. As a therapist, I've seen thousands of people who are so miserable on this topic. Homosexuals who don't know that their homosexuality is just a very normal part of the spectrum of sexuality. I've seen people who are transgender who are struggling with that, and with the messages of the people who are hating on them. I've watched religious people struggle with trying to follow their faith while at the same time being absolutely miserable in their sexuality. So I think, without telling people how to live their life, I think just communicating how they might start managing their sexual needs in a way that works for them. That's very important to me, and also that works for others, because I think, if you ever, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, but there's so many brilliant people out there, really gifted people, and they're very successful in business or politics, or even in religious hierarchies, in education and academia. But if you enter the term, let's just pick one, a random Um, ah, uh, pick business and sexual scandal, religion and sexual scandal, whatever it is. You will see article after article come up into infinity. You won't be able to read them all, of very famous, very powerful, very successful individuals who've been arrested for their behavior while working for the corporation, who've been fired because they made such boneheaded, foolish sexual decisions, who ended up costing their company millions of dollars in settlements, or who pulled down the share price overnight, and people, all the investors lost money in those cases. So it doesn't matter who we think of. I think that the thinking error there, Sarah, is that smart people presume that they're pretty smart about everything. But they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to manage sexuality intelligently. And there's quite an honorable explanation for that. No one has ever talked to them about managing sexuality intelligently. You might as well talk to a sailor in the 1700s about managing his diet intelligently.
Yeah.
When it comes to vitamin C, I was shocked to find out millions of sailors have died of scurvy.
Yeah.
It's a very common health problem, at least for the 2 centuries, leading up to the discovery of citrus fruits and what they could do for people. But there were other ways to solve that problem. And I think we do a disservice to people to focus so much on the technical aspects of their future career, but we teach them nothing about how to develop a life worth living, how to manage their sexuality intelligently, and how to go forward and mindfully interview and then build a life together with another person. We don't teach people any of that. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's so many discussions about things that are not taught in schools that should be, or that are not taught in, whatever education, like how to do your taxes and all that kind of thing. You learn so many things in school, but then there's also so many things missing about living your real life. And I feel like maybe this is one of them that's super important and makes
Sure.
your life more fulfilling to know about.
Well, it could be the difference between catastrophic failure and bliss for the rest of your life. So it is a big thing. I can get through my life without knowing how to do my taxes because I
Yeah,
can
okay.
pay people to do that. And I can get through, and I have gotten through my life without being able to work on my own car. So auto mechanics, I'm so glad I never learned how to do that.
Yeah.
But I can't get through life without learning to manage my sexuality intelligently. And I think that's it's an idea that I hope will catch on, but we'll see. I only have, let's see, another 31 years before I'm 102, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay, there you go. Well, we are sadly coming to the end of our episode, and I have learnt so much from you. And I've just been sitting here writing so many notes within all of the questions that I have asked. So sadly, I am going to ask you to be self-promoting because you've shared so much great advice. And if our listeners want to find out more about what you do and who you are, where should they go?
Well, I think the most convenient thing, frankly, would be to go to my website, Stephen Ing, one word, Stephen Ing, Stephen with a V, Ing, I-N-G, and .com. And there they will find links to more about my ideas than anybody would ever want to know.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that that is linked in our show notes for today, along with any of your work or any resources that you think might be helpful. We'll just pop everything in the show notes and people can very easily access your website. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge on the podcast, and it's been fantastic to interview you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's been a real pleasure. And I really wish the best, even though I was very negative about love languages. I truly love my clients, and I really earnestly want everyone out there listening to this to sort these things out and to have that kind of happiness that I enjoy.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic that we've covered today, and you've been you've shared so much wisdom and been very engaging. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Sarah.
And to everybody tuning in, thank you for listening. I hope you've learned as much as I have in this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.
You've been listening to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at re.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.